The Wisp, Chapter 15. Girl. He stood not so tall, but seemingly gigantic to the teenagers. Even Den-mother would have been more welcomed. Colin, Bara, and Amy were startled by the appearance of Amy's stepfather. Girl, he barked again. Mr. Frank rarely called Amy by her name. As though ordered to attention by an army sergeant, she jumped to her feet. Bara didn't like Mr. Frank. Not at all. There was no way she wanted him to know about the diary. She slipped it into her bag. Mr. Frank didn't bother with Bara. To Colin he gave a look that could only be described as threatening. You were supposed to meet us 5 minutes ago, he snapped. I've better things to do than wait for you. Amy looked down. I'm sorry, I forgot. Sorry isn't good enough. You be on time. Colin had never met Mr. Frank, but the look he passed Bara confirmed he shared her feelings about him. Get a move on, Mr. Frank said and stalked away. Embarrassed, Amy couldn't even look at her friends. Bye, she said, head still lowered. Have a happy holiday. Happy holiday? Bara had been so caught up in the diary and the dreams that she'd forgotten it was the start of Thanksgiving break. Bara lay across the four-poster bed, flipping through a magazine, her sock feet crossed behind her head. Where are you going? She asked her mother. Miss Kavanagh was choosing clothing. She took a sip of wine before answering. I've decided to take a vacation, refresh my batteries. She held out her glass. Betty, rushing about, placing chosen pieces in trunks and suitcases, paused and refilled the glass. I'll take the flat shoes, Miss Kavanagh told her. No heels, madam? Miss Kavanagh sipped from her glass again. I don't think I'll need them. Bara threw the magazine aside and jumped up from the bed. She grabbed the shoes and so Betty couldn't put them in the suitcase, hugged them to her chest. Where are you going? She asked again. Betty winked and waited patiently. Miss Kavanagh let out a bothered sigh. Just to a spa, a friend from the club suggested. She said her cousin went and came back looking 10 years younger. Now will you give me my shoes? Miss Kavanagh drained what was left of her wine and held out the glass again. Betty immediately stopped what she was doing and refilled it. Bara cringed. Her mother had never cared much about getting older before Courtney. Now she seemed obsessed with shedding the years. Bara gave up the shoes. You look fine, Mom. You don't need to look younger. You're so sweet. What a sweet child I have, Betty. Miss Kavanagh kissed Bara's heart-shaped face. She kissed her forehead and then continued to go through her clothes. Betty ruffled Bara's curls. That you do, ma'am. Never met a nicer child. Miss Kavanagh began to instruct the packing of a third suitcase. You're taking a lot. How long are you going for? A month or so. A month? But that means you'll be gone for Thanksgiving. You're meant to spend the time with your father. You won't even miss me. Yes, I will. Miss Kavanagh studied an array of sweaters. I'll take the blue set. It's in the third guest room. Fetch it, will you? And bring another bottle of Chardonnay. Another bottle, ma'am? Yes, Betty. Another bottle. From Napa. Betty gave Bara a sympathetic smile and went in search of the sweater set and wine. Bara waited for her to leave and then leapt from the bed. She grabbed hold of her mother's sleeve and tugged like a toddler. You can't go. Miss Kavanagh pulled from her grasp. Bara, really. I will miss you, Mom. And I'll miss you, but it's all been decided. You can spend most of the time at the dorms, but you'll go to your father's for Thanksgiving. I could just stay here. By yourself? Betty will be here. She'll keep me company. I've given Betty the month off. It won't do. I'm thinking of redecorating. Redecorating? Why are you redecorating? The house could use some freshening up, some new drapes, some paint. The place will smell of fumes. You need to go to your father's. Miss Kavanagh swallowed what was left of her wine. Betty, where's that bottle? She hollered. As Bara watched Amy scurry after Mr. Frank, she didn't know who she felt sorrier for. Amy, who'd have to avoid the anger of her stepfather, or herself, who'd be dodging the supposed goodwill of her stepmother. Okay, she felt sorrier for Amy. Bara could see the Frank family car, a run-down sedan parked on the edge of the square. She watched Amy get into the back seat. Amy looked so sad. It broke her heart. Bara didn't know exactly what went on in the Frank home. She didn't like to think about it, but she knew one thing. Amy would be a lot happier living in the dorms. Bara would be relieved when they were both back at school. Colin interrupted her thoughts. It's getting dark. Don't you have to be somewhere? He knew she'd be spending the holiday with her father. He'd been invited for Thanksgiving dinner. His own parents were out of the country. Come on, he grinned. I'll walk you home. Mr. Kavanaugh's new home, the Lavender House, was in the Grand Oaks district, so named for its oak-lined streets. It was but a mile from the library. Bara wished it was further. They left the square and walked along the east end of Windfall Boulevard, cutting through the forest which flanked it. They raced a setting sun. The sun was winning. Colin prattled on about some sporting event, and Bara pretended to be interested. They were purposely not mentioning the diary and her strange dreams, trying to make as though everything was normal. It would have been a lovely walk if they both hadn't been preoccupied with what they refused to discuss. Finally, Bara couldn't stand it. Colin asked her who she thought would win some game or other, the lions or the bears, and she responded with a question of her own. What do you think the messenger meant by all beauty is not beauty? Cedric talked about evil coming as beauty. There has to be a connection. Colin wasn't bothered by the change in topic. I've been thinking. It has to be the witches, right? Guinevere was supposed to be some great looker. Cedric and the messenger must have meant her. Maybe, but why do they want me to know about her now? All this happened over 100 years ago. Assuming what's in the diary actually happened, and that's a big if, but if it's a real telling, Guinevere may still be alive. She was immortal or something, remember? And the maze? Do you think it's real? I don't know, but with the similarities to your dreams, it can't all be a coincidence. So witches and witchcraft, you think it's all real? It's that or you're crazy. I know that's not true. You really believe me? He gave her a smile and shrugged. But what I really want to know is how the Wisp fits in. Why did she want you to have the diary? And why did she lead you into the woods? Even if it's just a dream, it all has to mean something. What is she trying to tell you? I'd like to know that too, but I'm glad about one thing. What's that? At least the eyeless me is taking a breather. Yeah, he grinned. There's that. They arrived at the Lavender House. The iron gates of the Victorian mansion were shut tight. Dusk had settled, and a gray slate roof was silhouetted against a purple sky. The arched and gabled windows of the second floor were dark. It wasn't an inviting sight. Bara lifted the lid to the security box and punched in the code, her birthday. The gate clicked and swung open an inch. She paused before slipping inside and looked back. I guess I'll see you for Thanksgiving. I'm glad you're coming for dinner. I'm happy for the backup. Colin chuckled. She's not that bad. She's not your stepmother. Courtney won't stop hovering. I think she just wants to get to know you. Bara felt like a whiner. Colin's parents always left him on his own. He had no choice but to live in the dorms. She often wondered if it didn't hurt him to see them so little. If it did, he never let on. But then he rarely complained about anything. Always joking. That was Colin. Still, his parents paid him next to no attention, and here she was harping on having too much. Yeah, you're right. Bara turned to go, but Colin stopped her again. Hey, Barbie, do me a favor. Don't read any more of the diary until I'm with you. I don't think it's a good idea to read it on your own. All right, I'll wait until tomorrow. He didn't seem to believe her. Promise? He said with an odd gentleness. Okay, Dad. She gave him a playful punch. He smiled and rubbed his arm. Oh, and I'd wear shoes to bed. She laughed. Good idea. Putting on a Texan accent, he drawled, Until tomorrow then, ma'am. Not waiting for a response, he turned and walked away, whistling. Bara watched him round the corner and waited for the sound of his whistle to die in the distance before slipping through the gates.
The Wisp is published on Amazon.com. Also available on Amazon is Monsters, Real and Imagined, Tragic, Frightening, and Funny, All Too Brief, a collection of short stories and poetry. Strays, a collection of short stories and philosophical love poems, and Tattoo, Calling All Soldiers Home, a collection of poems in brevity.